Welcome to the Wolf Power Club, the weekly podcast where we discuss energy, industry and politics. I'm your host Alex. I've sold and bought a few companies and also I've sold billions of litres. Join me on this journey to net zero. Download on Apple Podcasts. Season 1 brought to you by AIM Recruit, the leading recruiters in logistics, transport and energy at www.aimrecruit.com. Wolf Power Club, welcome to the special on the ONS's 50th anniversary. This was actually one of the most incredible experiences, and this very much is a reflection, having been to the event for the first time and taken in what actually it means to the energy industry. So what's the history of ONS? Well, about 50 years ago, just a little bit longer, there was obviously the discovery of oil and gas in Norway. It would take a country and a population that very much was dependent on things like the fishing industry and other small industries and quite a poor nation within Europe to one of the most important energy providers in both oil and gas and now to stay in sustainable products to make sure that they could be a powerhouse of the energy world and certainly of Northern Europe. Now, a show was started 50 years ago, and that's hence the celebration. In 1974, the current King of Norway opened the show as a 37-year-old man looking to make sure that Stavanger, which is kind of like the Aberdeen of Norway, made sure it had an energy industry that could support the oil and gas sector. They had some incredible stats that 50 years ago there was 15 nations. This year, in 2024, there was over 95 countries participating with nearly 60,000 people attending. And I found such a wonderful, warm community in Norway welcoming us in. So I wasn't quite sure what to expect. And I think it's fair to say that although we've got some brilliant trade shows in the United Kingdom, there is nothing like I saw with a whole city getting behind an event. So it started off with Prince Haakon himself opening the ceremony to a good few thousand people in the auditorium. And he talked about the importance of the oil and gas sector for Norway. He then also went and talked on about actually the responsibility to look at alternatives and the energy journey. And then he also talked about the rights for Norwegians as a democracy to have the opportunity to actually voice their concerns and even protest over the few days. But as Norway being a liberal democracy, celebrating that. Hadn't ever quite seen someone that was both in monarchy but so clued up in the energy industry. And we'll see some cuts to what he said just now.
Decisions were made in those early days to ensure that the Norwegian companies and workers would benefit from the discovery of Ekofisk in 1969. What followed was the evolution of a world-leading industry cluster based here in Western Norway. This transformed Norway as a country, just like the discovery of oil and gas has transformed other countries around the world, represented by many of you here today.
Then we went on and we had from the Prime Minister of Norway the realities facing Norway today and what a difficult time it had since the last ONS. So the previous year's ONSs, and it happens every 2 years, some had to be cancelled due to COVID. And then when they came back in 2024, the world looked very, very different today. I think probably the main difference is obviously what's happened in Ukraine. And you had a Prime Minister who was very clear about what that meant to his country. Again, I can't wait that later in this episode you can hear a bit more from the Prime Minister on his exact points. But I understood exactly what he was saying. He talked about the ethical role Norway had to do to expand gas production in 2022, because without Norway, the price of bread and other fundamentals that come from gas supply in Europe would have shot through the roof due to the terrible plans of Putin's regime going into Ukraine and affecting gas supply to Western Europe. When you saw a leader on the forefront talk about the decisions he made that he's had to do since being Prime Minister in 2021, you realise the importance that Norway has in a very much the European power supply. And actually, if you don't get things like gas, then actually basics on the table like bread will just go through the roof to create economic issues across Europe. He then also went on to talk about the role that, although there has to be a desire to get greener, the importance that oil and gas plays in the future. And I'd have to totally agree with him. I think that although the world's in transition, you have to actually realise that lifestyles and communities are dependent on the key energy industries that are about today. And I think what you could also recognise is he talked about the investment that Norway as a government and its industry is doing in future technologies. And this was a theme throughout the show, whether it came from digital solutions to scale-up solutions to net zero solutions and going forward, but are very much a reality and a support for the industry. The other thing I like the Prime Minister talking about is that the energy sector should be celebrated by Norwegians, and it's the place that he wants the budding minds of the Norwegians to go into for their jobs and careers. I really wish that more politicians in our United Kingdom and across the Western world would talk about this. This really is one of the greatest industries on earth, and I know I bang on about it because I'm so passionate about energy, but genuinely, if you're a listener right now about to end school or in university and you're like, what's a great industry to go into, then undoubtedly the energy industry is, and there's still a long way to go in the oil and gas sector to basically fuel the world and fuel its dreams.
Crown Prince mentioned what were things like in 1974. Well, Your Royal Highness, I just turned 14. So on the 26th of August 1974, I would be 14 years old and 1 day. Stavanger had 84,000 people and Norway 3.9 million. Think about it. Trygve Bratteli was Prime Minister and Gro Harlem Brundtland became Minister on the Environment. Gro, are you here? Later. She always will be around. The Statoil oil field was discovered. There was Abba and Waterloo, and we had the last World Ski Championship where the big issue was, should you have wooden skis or the other skis? It's part of the story that Norwegians kept to the wooden skis too long. Others were smarter and faster in that transition. There's a lesson to learn. We were on our way. Ultimately, it's about people. So here too we have a job to do together, because transition will also come on the people side. In many sectors, health, schools, technology, the biggest challenge ahead will be a shortage of skilled labor. I met with some party friends here this morning, bringing me reports from the health sector, from the industry sector, and that's common to all sectors. How do we get the people we need to reach the goals we set? In the last 3 years, we have seen 140,000 new jobs in Norway, 9 of 10 coming in small and medium industry. This is our job-creating machine. And we aim to get another 150,000 by 2030. So if you managed 140,000 in the last 3 years, we could manage 150,000 in the next 6 years. Third point, which is the green transition, which I think the Crown Prince described eloquently. And it's happening now, gradually, as the IEA's excellent reports, led by my friend Fathil so clearly underlines. So we have to do this based on knowledge, based on science, and based on political and sound economic convictions. At the same time, as we continue to provide energy security for our European friends, we will push forward the energy transition. Norway, dear friends, is in transition. From day one, the green transition has been on top of my agenda as Prime Minister. What does that mean? Well, it means that we aim to cut emissions from our oil and gas production by 50% by 2030 and to net zero by 2050. We aim to develop new industries with carbon capture and storage, CCS, hydrogen with our German and other partners.
I then enjoyed very, very much when the international energy industry's Dr. Fathil cracked a few jokes. He obviously went on the offensive about the need for transition, but the best joke he definitely cracked at ONS this year. He thanked the Norwegians for being a great energy nation, for supporting the industry, but he did raise with the Prince and the Prime Minister, actually, that Norway really needs to do better on the international football stage, and that it was disgraceful they had players like Haaland and yet they failed to qualify for the major tournaments. I can't agree with you more, Fatty. It is an absolute mockery that Norway isn't at the World Cup or the European Championships when you've got the best striker in the world at the moment. But on a serious note, and where sport has a huge part to play in the ONS, is one of the main arenas that was hosting many of the major energy companies of the world, was normally the ice hockey stadium for the Oilers. I gotta say, my daughters very much enjoyed getting some Oilers flags and waving to the success of the Oilers and what's going on. But what were some of the big meat topics at the energy conference? It was really, really great to hear the CEO of Total fiercely defend the need for gas and gas production and the role Total was playing in that. It was good to see the International Energy Agency and Total discussing things like LPG and LNG and the need to actually have LPG growing across the world to sort out the problems we have from cooking from wood burning. It's a big problem, that the bad fumes that come from wood burning, and why LPG is needed. On then, a fascinating part was there was a huge amount of the conference that was dedicated to tech. And for all of those you know, I obviously work for a big data company, and essentially where it was clear that people wanted an answer on is how can we use data to improve the maintenance of heavy assets, and how essentially can you get more from the current rigs, from the current pipelines to have less downtime. And it was clear when we heard the data companies speak, the way data can be used to scenario plan, resource parts, and that companies need to go on that journey. I saw one of the other exhibitors there, Jotun, who were giving out these wonderful penguins, and essentially as their logo, they are looking for a digital solution to go across Europe to help that maintenance of pipelines. I also saw digital came in massively when you're looking at the big well companies that have hundreds of thousands of wells across the world, and how can you use that data to be better at delivering energy. Then I saw one of my heroes. We've got some footage. Very sadly, the sound didn't come out perfectly. And the reason why we're featuring Lord Browne is that long term we want to have a proper full interview with Lord Browne. I'd say, look, when Lord Browne was leading BP, it was a company that had unbelievable growth, and it also had unbelievable challenges. And I went to a session with Lord Browne, and you see our thumbnail with me staying Lord Browne. And not only is he one of my business heroes, it was great to hear what his various investment companies are investing in today. And what he wants is stuff that's not only sustainable, but he talked about an investment moat. And the reason he talked about an investment moat is that within those opportunities, he wants stuff that can really scale. And I agree with Lord Browne. Too many people talk about technologies that essentially aren't scalable or aren't looking at supplying millions to billions of people, whereas the areas Lord Browne's investment companies are looking into is stuff that is truly sustainable and truly will sort out energy supply for whole communities. I think the other thing is that Lord Browne was very, very clear as well in that there isn't going to be a solution, and how to hedge your bets and do your homework and to make sure that you're looking at multiple things and multiple investments. I also felt that Lord Browne was pretty critical towards governments, expressing how essentially they need to do their part to create a landscape that investors can put money in. It's fair to say that too often you see governments using energy poverty as a reason to not support energy sustainability. And that is something that's going to be an ongoing theme in this podcast, and we will have to look at and enjoy. But then let's look at some things that were uniquely Norwegian at ONS. So the first was, well, let's come back to the protesters. Our good friend Greta Thunberg was there. Sadly, I missed her. So Greta, if you do see me next time, I'd love to get you on the podcast. We love a balance of opinions, and Greta did come. And what I would say about the protest, 60,000 people came to the conference in good spirits to grow careers, grow business, and look for energy solutions. And there was 30 protesters. But I really respected the way Norwegians gave them their opportunity to speak. You can probably see a photo now of the partially naked protest that occurred outside, or is inside the conference centre, outside one of the main entrances on the middle of the conference. And to be fair, though, to the protesters, they said their bit about why they felt oil kills. I have to say I slightly disagree with their opinions. I appreciate the environmental impact, but ultimately there's many good things that come from sustainability. They went round and challenged some of the things that had agreed at COP and didn't believe they had been done while doing their semi-naked protest. And then they peacefully walked around the auditorium trying to educate people on their point of view. And what I also liked, though, was the respect the security guards gave at ONS. They didn't challenge them. They let them have their peace. But what was wonderful was there's no sabotage, no paint throwing, no jigsaw puzzles stopping big sporting events or damaging art. They then left peacefully within an hour. I think Norway are a real credit, not only to the energy industry, but how you allow democracy to happen in such a conference. And then there was just the truly amazing part for me about ONS using the harbour in Stavanger as a real key part of conference. So every evening there'd be excellent things from e-game championships through to great talks on what next is big in energy. I had a fantastic drinks event with Mackenzie, so I'd like to thank them for their hospitality. But I met a guy there who's trying to bring a startup to break nuclear models and to give cheap nuclear power in the North America. So big shout out to those guys, because then I'll put in the show notes the company link if you're interested in investing in small nuclear power. I'd never really heard of too many startups in the nuclear sector, so I think we'll have to do an international podcast where we get our friends from North America to talk about why they're on that journey to startups and that. There was much mergers and acquisition talk going on at ONS. There is opportunities for further investment into the North Oil Shelf, and it was great seeing the deals that have been done in various hotels and talked about that I'm sure over the next calendar year we'll see coming to life. And then how did it all end? Well, it ended with the most incredible concert, bringing together the whole city of Stavanger in the central square, sponsored by Shell and the joys of Halliburton. And on stage was Daphne, who I can best describe as Norway's Taylor Swift. And I had a good friend of mine, Matthew, who totally described me that Daphne is Daphne. It's not just Norway's Taylor Swift. She's a fantastic singer in her own right. And I found out she'd done duets with Bryan Adams and all sorts, and is a real local hero. But what was wonderful to see was during the conference, the thousands of students that came and attended to look to put their career into this space, but also at the concert, seeing tens of thousands of people enjoying this amazing light display before then a fireworks show celebrated ONS having a successful 50 years. Norway's a truly special country, and I really hope to be more involved in ONS and going in the future. And it's every 2 years, and I'd highly recommend any energy executive, any student listening, or anyone that really wants to understand our industry more, politician or other stakeholder, to go to ONS in 2026. I hope you've enjoyed this special. I'll just finish with come on Oilers. I hope you have a great season on the ice hockey tour. And I'd like to say at Wolf Power Club, we had an incredible time at ONS, and it really made me realise the importance of the industry, from princes to prime ministers to lords of the realms to the great fireworks show. Wolf Power Club were privileged to attend ONS. We'd like to thank our sponsor who took us there. And I'd like to thank my employer who took us there. It was absolutely incredible. But what I'd say is go there in 2026 and also look at what the Norwegian oil industry has done for Stavanger. Thank you for your indulgence. Keep on following Keep on downloading on Apple Podcasts and enjoy the next episode.